Welcome to Love Factually, the podcast that analyzes rom-coms and romantic films using the science of close relationships. We're your hosts, Paul Eastwick and Eli Finkel. Eli, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about When Harry Met Sally, the 1989 Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan showcase, written by Nora Ephron and directed by Rob Reiner.
Yeah.
For many of us, it's the movie that comes to mind first when we think of rom-coms.
Yep.
Some of the themes we'll explore are relationship trajectories, how to apologize, and, of course, whether men and women can actually be friends.
And fair warning, we'll be spoiling this movie today, so if you don't know that you really need to put the chocolate sauce on the side so the coconut cake doesn't get soggy, go ahead and watch this movie and come back. So, Eli, who are the key characters and couples in this movie?
Well, not surprisingly, the film tracks the relationship between Harry and Sally. Harry Burns is philosophical and cynical, even offensive, but also funny and kind. He's convinced that men and women can't be friends because sexual desire inevitably interferes. Sally Albright is anal retentive and optimistic. She's appalled by Harry's cynicism and gaucheness, but her gentle disposition prevents her from fully condemning him. The film also features three notable supporting characters. Marie, played by Carrie Fisher, is Sally's friend. She's in a long-term affair with a married man. She somehow sustains hope against all evidence that he will leave his wife. Jess, played by Bruno Kirby, is Harry's friend. He's laid back and seems to have settled into a complacent long-term singlehood. The third notable supporting character, played by Estelle Reiner, yes, that's the director's mom, has no name. She's the customer in Katz's Deli who delivers one of the most indelible lines in the history of cinema. I'll have what she's having.
Yep.
So,
she definitely does.
Those are the chess pieces. Are you ready to give us 1 minute on how the film moves them across the board?
I'm ready. Count me down.
Okay. On your mark, get set, and go.
In 1977, Harry and Sally meet for the first time on a drive from Chicago to New York City, and they mostly irritate each other. 5 years later, they meet for the second time on a plane, mostly irritating each other again. 5 years later, they meet for a third time in a bookstore after recent major breakups, and now we have the beginning of a beautiful New York friendship, where they become each other's confidants as they get back into dating, and Sally memorably teaches Harry how women fake orgasms at Katz's Deli. Harry tries to set up his friend Jess with Sally. Sally tries to set up her friend Marie with Harry, but on a double date for the ages, Jess and Marie fall immediately for each other instead. But one night when Sally is distraught upon finding out that her ex is getting married, Harry and Sally sleep together. Now, things are genuinely awkward. Neither can move past it. They have a huge fight at Jess and Marie's wedding, and the friendship is starting to fray. But Harry gets his act together, runs to a New Year's Eve party, and confesses his love for Sally. She is skeptical, and then she's overcome, and they get married 12 years and 3 months after first meeting.
Oh my goodness, right on time. You have perfected the speed up in the last 10 seconds.
Yeah,
you were all in.
I know.
Nice job.
Whoa. Whoa. So Eli, tell me, what is your relationship to this movie?
You know, it's bigger than I really realized. It's become like a big part of my own marriage, right? So regularly, I don't know why, my wife and I will turn to each other and talk about having too much pepper on my paprikash.
Sure.
And we'll
sure. Who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty standard, really. And we use the Billy Crystal accent when we do it. Also, my wife is really fond of telling me that I'm the worst kind, right? There's this line that you're the worst kind. You think you're low maintenance, but you're actually high maintenance. And the reason why she accuses me of this is I really do think I'm low maintenance, but I'm very compulsive about time. Like using time efficiently, and she's right that ends
she's
up...
right.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that is you. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's I don't care where we eat,
that.
And I'm happy to go anywhere on vacation, and I'm fine with all of it. But yeah, it's true that I'm high maintenance about time, and that is very high maintenance in general.
Yeah.
How about you? Is this a classic for you guys as well?
So I definitely have a very, very soft spot for this movie. One of the scenes that really hits me every single time is actually, it's not necessarily the last scene of the movie. I mean, the last scene of the movie is great.
Yeah.
But before that, when we are seeing Harry struggle with what he wants, I just find that to be beautifully depicted and in many ways antithetical to the typical rom-com arc, which is like lightning bolts. And I knew immediately, and all these stories we get from these other couples throughout the movie, a lot of them have a lot of lightning bolts in them, right?
Yeah.
I looked at them and I knew. And what I love about this movie is that Harry doesn't freaking know.
Yeah.
Right? It takes him a while to sort it out. And a lot of times these decisions are very, very hard. And, the knowledge about what to do, it doesn't just hit you from moment one.
Yeah.
So tell me, what does this movie get right about the nature of close relationships?
A lot of fun stuff.
Yeah.
Let me start with one that I think you'll enjoy. So something I appreciated about the character of Harry is he's offensive and obnoxious, but he's really good at apologizing, right? There's a couple points in the movie where, he's sort of gone too far and he can tell she's upset and he really just stops the whole thing. He doesn't get into some story about how he was justified. He just says, can I say something? There's something I want to say.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. And it's often with a hug.
It's the opposite of defensive. It's so great.
I know. And you don't expect it from him because he's so gauche and obnoxious. But the scene that I really loved is that Nora Ephron, when she was writing this film, does a contrast between the apology on one hand, the sort of like generous, gentle way of engaging with a partner, and she contrasts it with what we now would call the neg. The neg from pickup artist land, right? So many of our listeners will be familiar with this concept. It's where you do these like backhanded compliments that are kind of insults.
The first time we met, I really didn't like you that much.
I didn't like you.
Yeah, you did. You were just so uptight then. You're much softer now.
I hate that kind of remark. It sounds like a compliment, but really it's an insult.
Okay, you're still as hard as nails.
I just didn't want to sleep with you, and you had to write it off as a character flaw instead of dealing with the possibility that it might have something to do with you.
What's the statute of limitations on apologies?
10 years.
Ooh, I can just get it in under the wire.
Would you like to have dinner with me sometime?
And I just love this contrast between like two visions of how a man should hit on or try to seduce a woman. There's the neg and pickup artist world that's like, will you be kind of nasty so you can lower her self-esteem and then sneak in for the kill? And then there's this one that's like, no, that's horse shit, and she knows it, and she's going to call your ass on it. What you should do is like be kind and gentle, and then she says, want to go out sometime?
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it really does lead into the broader relationship trajectory issue that I think this movie just nails.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about what the typical relationship trajectory looks like, because it looks a lot like what these two experience.
Interesting.
This, a lot of research in social psychology on close relationships kind of assumes that it takes that bolt of lightning approach, right? People meet, bang, they're into each other, relationships form, or they don't. But what Danu Stinson and her colleagues point out is that we all have underappreciated how central the friends first form of dating is to the way that people actually form relationships. So in her work, what they generally find is that about 70% of relationships were friends first.
Interesting.
Okay. And that friendly period is like the median is like a year. Okay. The average is like 2 years. And if we don't count the 10 years where these two weren't really friends, that's just spot on. That's exactly what happens in this movie.
Yeah.
Right? That you're friends for that period of time. And this is a real friendship between these two, right? They are confidants. They are relying on each other.
Yeah.
They're going to each other for support.
Yep.
They're going to each other to build each other up, right?
Yeah.
You certainly get the sense that they're doing all of these sort of core attachment kinds of things.
Yeah,
right?
the late night conversations on the phone. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And this is a depiction of how it commonly works Not all the time. But what is fascinating to me is that even though this is like the movie that sets the standard for the modern rom-com, it's not the modern rom-com trope of bolt of lightning and we immediately knew, and it is closer to the way relationships actually work. It's one of the reasons that I absolutely love this movie.
Can you say a little bit about the role of sexual contact in the relationship trajectory sequence? I have this memory that you have some work that basically tracks trajectories. Like, okay, like they meet and then they like say hello and then they go on a date and then they, go to a movie and whatever after that. And then eventually they start like kissing and hooking up and doing this sexual activity and that sexual activity. And my understanding of your research is that it's really at that point, once things start getting physical and really once things start getting sexual, that people start to figure out there's potential here or there isn't. Did you think that was relevant in this case, or was this such an unusual situation where they'd known each other so long before they had sex? Did you find it relevant to understanding Harry and Sally?
Yeah, I do think it's relevant. And again, some of the data we have on this, you have to kind of make a little bit of an inference. Like what we see is that relationships initially go through this great period of uncertainty where people are like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what I want it to be. Will it be long-term? Will it be short-term? Will it be nothing at all? Yeah. The first sexual contact is kind of where the trajectories of long-term and short-term really start to differentiate. And basically what I think is happening is that when it's good, people want to keep doing it. And when it's not good, they're maybe like, maybe again or maybe not.
Interesting.
So it is in that sense. I do think when people have this, like, I'm committed to a friendship with this person, but then something happens, it is really rewriting the script for what the relationship is and does sort of require some reconfiguration. And we see them go through that here too. Now, there's the separate question of whether or not men and women can be friends when there is strong sexual attraction there, okay? And I think we are meant to believe in this movie that it's sort of a low simmer for these two. It's not powerful, but it's kind of there. Now, it is true that many heterosexual men and women who are friends experience some amount of attraction for each other. In fact, it's like 70% of men and 50% of women.
Oh, interesting.
Say that at least a little. Okay? It's very rare for them to say, like, it's a lot, right? But at least a little, it's the majority of the time, right? And I think that's also why, too, that when you ask people who were friends first and then get together and form a couple, how exactly did it happen? It's usually it just kind of happened thing. It's very rare that people say, oh, I was super into her from the beginning and I just like used the friendship to wear her down or something. That's not how, you can't really use it as an intentional strategy. It really is like there was something there and we didn't quite know what it was and we couldn't really identify it, but we liked being friends, and then all of a sudden it sort of grew from there. Again, that is the most common case.
Yes, but you're talking about the case where people upshift into like romantic involvement. But it sounds like there must be lots of cases where that upshift never happens, right? And so,
sure.
So what that seems to imply is that, of course, men and women are able to be friends. And I think we're actually building a stronger case here, which is men and women are able to be friends even when there is some amount of sexual attraction and even when that sexual attraction is never consummated. Is that your view of the literature?
Absolutely. And there are other studies where you ask people like, oh, like, what do you get out of your again, with heterosexuals, what do you get out of your opposite sex friendships? And people are like, the camaraderie's great. Like, I really love having somebody to confide in. I really trust them. Like, I learn a lot about the other gender. And it's like called a friendship and it's not complicated. Right. And the ulterior motive stuff is like way, way down the list.
Yeah. Look, I had this under misconceptions. I think the movie does seem to imply that young Harry was correct. right? Because it's like there's this hypothesis that's out there the whole time.
Yeah.
And then in the end, they end up together because the sex thing got in the way of the friendship or whatever, became the more important thing. And I just find that not credible. It's not credible not only for the reason you said, which is, why can't you be friends with somebody that you also find sexually attractive? I don't understand why that should necessarily be a problem. But also, it's kind of ludicrous to suggest that, I mean, I think you're supposed to believe a gendered version of this, that like a straight man has to be attracted to literally every woman that he knows. Every attractive woman, maybe every woman, like the movie's ambiguous about that. And I just find that ludicrous. Like, just because a straight man is heterosexual doesn't mean every single woman is going to be a source of interest. So both because he's not interested in everybody he meets, and because there's no reason why you can't be friends with somebody that also you feel a bit of frisson toward. I think the movie is wrong in a big way on that idea.
That's really interesting. Well, what else do you have that the movie gets right?
You know, I had a little thing that I appreciated about the movie, which is I think it sensitized an earlier era of Americans to the orgasm gap, right? The idea that some women are faking this stuff. Of course, men sometimes fake too. We don't want to overstate it here. But in general, faking orgasm happens a lot more with women who are having sex with men. And for me, one of the things that I found relevant is there's a large literature now on this idea of the orgasm gap, not exactly on faking orgasm, but on like what percentage of the time do you have an orgasm when you have sexual contact, or in your most recent sexual contact, did you have an orgasm? And what's kind of wild about that is, yes, there is a difference between men and women. You look at, say, a man and a woman having sex together or hooking up together early in the relationship, and men are indeed significantly, substantially more likely to have an orgasm than women are. And there's a lot of explanations for this that rely on, well, it's sort of easier to get a man off than to get a woman off. And I'm not denying that there's some validity to that. But then, of course, you can look at like women with women. Right? It's like, how often do women have an orgasm when they have a first hookup with a woman relative to with a man? And lo and behold, the gender difference goes away. Like women have orgasms at about the rate I think that men have orgasms when they are with a woman, just not when they are with a man. And Harry, to some degree, like deserves to be called out in the way that she calls him out when she's faking that orgasm, because we got to just acknowledge the sort of straight men of the world, or at least the men who have sex with women of the world, need to acknowledge that there's a math problem, and that some of us are being duped, and that some of us are probably not being sensitive enough lovers to warrant not being duped.
That's a great way to put it.
So, Paul, I'm interested. I've talked a bit about stuff that I'm excited about that the movie gets right. What else did you have in mind?
Okay, so I do think that there's some great motivated reasoning that we see throughout this movie. And it's really captured by, at first, the scene where Harry and Sally are discussing what it means to be high maintenance.
Ooh, Ingrid Bergman. Now she's low maintenance.
Low maintenance?
There are two kinds of women, high maintenance and low maintenance.
And Ingrid Bergman is low maintenance?
And LM, definitely.
Which one am I?
You're the worst kind. You're high maintenance, but you think you're low maintenance.
I don't see that.
You don't see that? Waiter, I'll begin with a house salad, but I don't want the regular dressing. I'll have the balsamic vinegar and oil, but on the side. And then the salmon with the mustard sauce, but I want the mustard sauce on the side. On the side is a very big thing for you.
Well, I just want it the way I want it.
I know. High maintenance.
All right. So this is clearly something that, I mean, he's sort of, teasing her about it.
Yeah.
But he is seeing this as something of a character flaw. And I believe that we, the audience, are supposed to think she's a little uptight, right?
Yeah,
She's a little much, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. But at the end of the movie, okay,
I know where
we
you're
get
going.
one of the great lines, which is, I love that it takes you an hour and a half to order a sandwich.
Yeah.
Okay? Not tolerate that.
Nope.
Not I have decreased how much it bugs me. I love that. Okay? And furthermore, it's not just that he likes it in her, he's starting to take it on himself, because we see in the very final scene of the movie when they are describing their wedding cake that he's like, hey, people don't always want the chocolate on top. Sometimes you want it on the side.
Fascinating.
And he is fully on board with the high maintenance approach that she has, and he loves it. And there you go. That's motivated reasoning.
Wow.
And that's how relationships work. Count it.
Actually, I put one on the board. I'm with you there. But I what's interesting about that is that's what I think Art Aaron and people who study self-expansion theory mean when they talk about inclusion of the other in the self.
Yeah.
And I didn't really register what you're saying here about, how he has really internalized it. But you're right. In that final scene, they've got all these interstitial parts where they're interviewing couples, and the final couple being interviewed is actually Harry and Sally, and they're talking about their wedding and how wonderful it is. And you're right, is totally into the idea that, of course, you have to have the chocolate sauce on the side so it doesn't get soggy. Yeah. And I encoded that as him being like very tolerant of her. But you're right. I don't actually think that's the vibe.
I think he's all in.
He's like, you're right. I've internalized that for myself. He's incorporated part of who she is into his own identity. It's cool.
Put it on the side. What's wrong with putting it on the side? Just put it on the side.
That's right.
Again, I could keep going. There's one other thing that I really like that speaks to like my research worldview of relationships, and it's in the double date, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're trying to set up Marie with Harry and Jess with Sally, and everything gets twisted up, right? Mm-hmm. So clearly the matches they intended aren't going great.
So, what are we going to order?
Well, I'm going to start with the grilled radicchio.
Jess, Sally is a great order. Not only does she always pick the best thing on the menu, but she orders it in a way that even the chef didn't know how good it could be.
I think restaurants have become too important.
Oh, I agree. Restaurants are to people in the 80s what theater was to people in the 60s. I read that in a magazine.
I wrote that.
Get out of here.
No, I did. I wrote that.
I've never quoted anything from a magazine in my life. That's amazing. Don't you think that's amazing? And you wrote it?
I also wrote Pesto's the quiche for the 80s.
Get over yourself.
I did.
Where did I read that?
New York Magazine.
Sally writes for New York Magazine.
That piece had a real impact on me. I mean, I don't know that much about writing, but...
Look, it spoke to you, and that pleases me.
I mean, you have to admire people who can be that articulate.
Nobody has ever quoted me back to me before.
And again, we're off, right? Mm-hmm. The relationship is off. And what a random conversational nugget to find in that interaction. And from there, it's all sort of golden between the two of them, and that to me it really captures the randomness, but also the magic of hitting on something like that.
Yeah, the relationship is off to the races. The relationship is on, and you're exactly right. Like she could have said any other thing, and the entire evening would have played out differently. They just stumbled across something that happened to be like enormously exciting for the two of them.
Yeah. What are some misconceptions that you identified? I mean, we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, we did.
The men and women can't be friends thing. Of course they can. But other things in here that struck you as not really the way relationships work.
I'm not sure this is something the movie gets wrong exactly, but these characters live in a sort of fantasy land, right? Like the money is plentiful.
New York City in late 80s.
Yeah, yes, but a certain type of person, right? Money's plentiful, work isn't stressful, there are no political injustices. So I think
fair
that
enough.
It's like, I'm not saying that every movie has to represent the world perfectly, but it's doubtful that the experience these people have is particularly representative of how the average couple, the average person experiences life and love, just because regular people don't live in this sort of like fantasy land where there aren't external troubles about things. And so I don't think the movie got it wrong in terms of Harry and Sally's relationship, but I do think it's a limit on how broad the lessons are that we can take from the movie.
Fascinating. Are we okay with everything that happens in this movie?
More or less, but I have some concerns. Do you want to start us off here?
I think it's interesting, again, to delve back into the question of the sort of moral issue of being friends with somebody, if you're heterosexual, being friends with somebody of the opposite gender, if you are romantically attracted to them, right? So is there something wrong with that? Keeping other gender friends around for like when the day comes that you're single again, that's kind of gross. And I think in order to address this, it's important to pull apart why people have friends in the first place, right? We have friends because we are creatures who need to attach, who have a strong need to belong, and we need to feel like we can confide in people. We need support from people, but we also get a lot out of supporting them. We like to be celebrated when we have success, but we also like to celebrate other people. But my feeling about it has always been like, if we're actually talking about friendship, then it's fine. But I have known people too who do that sort of collecting thing, and that's a little gross. Like we don't need that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I have three things. Let me do one very quickly, one kind of quickly, and then I'll focus on the big one. So the very quickly thing is, I sort of keep track of ways in which content has aged badly over time, and there was that joke about like Ethiopian starvation, right?
That
like
wasn't
the
great.
Famine. And I'm old enough. I was like a kid in the 80s, and I remember like, Ethiopian famine jokes. And for the life of me, I don't know why we ever did this. Another thing is she slaps him in the face. Sally like slaps Harry in the face for reasons that I'm not sure that it's ever acceptable, but it's like one of these like rom-com gags that like the woman slaps the man in the face, and I just like don't love it.
It's not a great gag.
Not a great gag, really. But in terms of like, are we okay with this? There's the big one, which I think we can rest at the feet of all rom-coms and romantic movies, or at least most. And we can think of this as the Bella DePaulo critique, right? And this is the idea of singleism, the idea that everybody, of course, wants to be in a one-man, one-woman romantic relationship. And maybe people sometimes expand it out to be, same-sex relationships as well. But I think this movie is guilty in a big way of making it seem like life without a romantic partner is bereft and hollow. I mean, everybody wants to have it. So we follow Harry and Sally. Of course, like I said before, they don't have fleshed out lives. So all we know about them is their romantic lives. And then the friends, so there's the Carrie Fisher character who's dying to have this man leave his wife. And even when the other friend couple gets together, they say, please tell me I'll never be out there again. Because obviously the be all end all is to be in a committed romantic relationship. And again, where the movie really, I think, jumps the shark on this, or at least goes really extreme on this, is you see when Harry and Sally are good buddies, that they buy a Christmas tree together and then like carry it home together. And it's this lovely, beautiful thing. And the next year when things are sad and bereft, she buys the Christmas tree herself. And she can't really get it to her house. It's like heavy and complicated to carry. And she's like dragging it through New York, and it's miserable. But what the hell? I mean, people who don't have romantic partners still have friends, right? They're not like totally isolated. And if I don't have this romantic partner, then like life is bereft and hollow. People can have like fully meaningful lives, and they can go shopping with a friend for, a Christmas tree. None of this is to say that people don't care about being involved in romantic relationships. The large majority of people do care. They want that for their lives. But the movie and again, the genre more generally sort of, I think, exacerbates the feeling of like loneliness or stigma associated with not having a significant romantic partner.
All right. I think this is fun because I think I 70% disagree.
Interesting.
I think what the movie is trying to say is that being in a state of singlehood and searching is an exhausting drag.
Yep.
And there are a few ways to not experience that drag. One is to have a friend you go Christmas tree shopping with. even if that friend is somebody of the other gender, even if that friend is somebody that you will get together with one day. And I understand that as the audience, we're like kind of rooting for that.
Yes.
But technically speaking, they are friends when they get the Christmas tree. And that is a message of need to belong and togetherness and people being with people. I don't see that as an anti-singles message.
That's a good point. If we stipulate that this isn't a rom-com adhering to all the tropes of a rom-com, and this is one step on the way to the actual meaningful endpoint, which is, of course, not the friendship, but the love and not the love, but the romantic couplehood, then I agree with you that if we stipulate that that's just a friendship thing happening, then it would be a counterexample. That's not the way I read it, but that would be a counterexample if we read it that way.
I think this movie breaks so many of the tropes that it is a fair reading in that way. Yes, they end up together. Yes, they end up getting married.
Yeah.
But I think there are enough moments that break it that the movie is giving us a real depiction of friendship.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Quotes that struck you. I mean, should we just start with the obvious one here?
Yeah. Hit me. What's
Let's
the
just
classic?
do it. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
I love that you get cold when it's 71 degrees out. I love that it takes you an hour and a half to order a sandwich. I love that you get a little crinkle above your nose when you're looking at me like I'm nuts. I love that after I spend a day with you, I can still smell your perfume on my clothes. And I love that you are the last person I want to talk to before I go to sleep at night. And it's not because I'm lonely, and it's not because it's New Year's Eve. I came here tonight because when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible.
Yeah, you want it to start right away. Once you know, and again, I said this up at the top, but one of the things I love about this movie is that he doesn't know right away. It takes him a while to figure it out. I find that very realistic and very compelling.
Yeah.
Do you have any others?
Well, I mean, I did love that one. I mean, and honestly,
sure.
like, it's just so good, and I really remember it, right? Like, you see the movie one time, in 20 years, you still remember that one. Another one that I liked is when Harry and Sally are having their big fight, when she's very angry with him for the last, whatever it is, third of the movie, and they're having a fight about how they reacted to the fact that they had sex and then didn't connect that well about the fact that they had sex. And, he says, I'm not saying it didn't mean anything. I'm saying, why does it have to mean everything? And it's an interesting perspective. It's an interesting point that both people might look back and say, there was an event and it's meaningful. And what he's saying is, you're allowing this to color everything. And I get the point that there's something distressing here and that we need to work it through and that there are implications, of course, but that there's a whole lot more here than just that. And so why is it that we're letting this color everything? I think it's an interesting observation, and it's clear to me why there might be two perspectives on that issue.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a great one for that sort of subjectivity idea in here. I've got another one that I love. I mean, this is when she's distressed about Joe.
All this time, I've been saying that he didn't want to get married. But the truth is, he didn't want to marry me. He didn't love me.
And boy, I think this is probably a very common experience where a relationship breaks up and we tell ourselves a story about the other person and where that person was in their life. Oh, and they didn't want X, Y, Z. And then lo and behold, they get into another relationship and now they do want X, Y, Z. And that is really upsetting because you think, like, why couldn't I have been that? Here I was ready to deliver that. It must have been about me all along. I mean, that's kind of the worst kind of breakup, of rejection.
This idea of like commitment readiness, like, so yes, it could be that it's not about me, but it could be the idea that, well, he wasn't ready when he was with me, and for various reasons, one of which could have to do with my personality, but he might be in a different state of his career, a different state of circumstance. And this idea of commitment readiness is something that comes up throughout the film. So when he's talking in his paprikash voice and he says, I am not ready yet, or not good for anybody now. This is one of the things that I sort of wish we knew, right? In the category of like, what do I wish we knew about relationships? There is a little bit of work on commitment readiness. It's hard to study really rigorously because you can't take people outside of their social networks. And as you've observed, it's quite common that we end up with a relationship with someone in our social network. So maybe I feel ready for a relationship because one of my friends is really appealing to me. But if I don't have a friend who's appealing to me, I feel like I'm not ready. But that's one of the things I wish we knew. And I think there's a few other ideas in here. Did you have thoughts about things that came up in the movie that you wish relationship scientists knew more about?
Yeah, so I think the big one for me is wanting to know how much online dating is changing, dare I say, wrecking this, right? I mean, I sort of, is it changing the tendency for people to be able to form long-term friendships, whether those friendships are more casual or very meaningful, like we see in this movie, and can we turn it around? I mean, this is something that I worry about. I worry about online dating turning the whole enterprise into a consumer mindset. What am I worth? What are you worth? What is the best I can do? Taking the attachment out of it. And I would like to know what online dating is doing to these sorts of trajectories. It's possible it's not doing much. I mean, that's my hope, is that the reality is you meet a lot of people online dating. You click with some, you don't click with others. And maybe you remain friends with some. They introduce you to other people, and networks still grow and change. But I worry that we're just kind of dating in tiny two-person bubbles now and not in networks over time like we see here.
Yeah. Another question the movie raised for me is, what are the implications of having sex with a friend? So when Harry and Sally have sex, it's basically friendship ending, right? They eventually reverse it into a romantic relationship, but it pretty much ends their friendship. And people talk about this idea, this phenomenon exists of friends with benefits. But in general, I think this is viewed as like sort of a weird fringe thing that maybe like people do early in life, but you really wouldn't want to have because it's sort of weird and strange. But of course, we do wiffle ball with friends, and we go to dinner with friends, and we have deep emotional conversations with friends. And in general, I don't know, like the literature doesn't seem to have that much to say about, is it ever a good idea or a relationship benefiting to have sex with a friend, and what are the risks that might be involved?
I think that's right. It's hard to bring the data to bear on this exactly, but I will say I don't think it's just sex. I think it's a lot of the things that come with attachment. So yes, it is true that friends can be very close, but you often see a lot of jealousy too. When, say, one member of a couple gets very emotionally close with somebody else. That's also something that can push the boundaries of what's considered acceptable. So I do think that the whole suite of sex and attachment is, for people who follow monogamous norms, like, we expect those to be bound to one relationship unless you have, worked out arrangements to the contrary.
Yeah, that's true.
So any of that bleed there can present challenges.
Yes, you're talking about people who are in a relationship, so in a primary, so to speak, relationship, and like, what do they do on the side? I'm also interested in this. Like, you're single. You're not involved in a relationship, but you have this close friend, and you guys kind of find each other attractive, but don't want to be in a serious romantic relationship or a serious romantic relationship with this person. I just don't think the field knows that much about the circumstances under which, in addition to like all these other activities we enjoy together, like throwing this one into the mix is a good idea or a bad idea, or even why. I don't think we have strong theory or evidence about when and why this is likely to be a good or a bad idea.
Right, because if it were just about like deepening the attachment, it'd be like, well, what's wrong with that, right? But it's clearly there's more to it.
That's right. I did have one other question that this movie raised for me that I wish we knew more about, which is, It's related to that part in the movie where Harry's talking to his friend Jess, and Harry's explaining, I think while they're doing a wave at a sporting event, that like his wife has left him. And Jess says, marriages don't break up on account of infidelity. It's just a symptom that something else is wrong. And Harry, I don't know if you remember the line, he says, oh, really? Well, that symptom is fucking my wife. And it's a great line, but it does raise the broader question of the extent to which infidelity tends to be a cause or a consequence of relationship dissatisfaction. And the literature, I was reviewing this literature recently.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the literature is pretty broadly consistent with the intuitive idea that infidelity is causally destructive. But only recently, like last year, was the first really big, impressive longitudinal big sample study that looked at this question, that basically followed 14,000 people over the course of, an 8-year period. And so they could actually track what was the trajectory of relationship quality before and after an infidelity event. And I don't think this is the final word. That's why I think we need more information to know. But I was surprised to discover that the relationship satisfaction trajectory descends sharply before the infidelity event, and there doesn't seem to be any exacerbation after the infidelity. So we don't see much evidence here that the relationship gets even worse after an infidelity, although it's a little complicated because some people break up right away. And so the story, I just don't think that the field knows the answer yet on the extent to which declining satisfaction predicts infidelity, or infidelity predicts declining satisfaction.
But it's kind of like if the relationship survives, that's the low point.
That's right
there.
I think that's right. But then it's like, well, when and why do the relationships survive? And it turns out, in fairness to the field, like it's sort of wild that we, with this many studies, that I actually don't think we know the answer here. But it is hard to do this, right? It is hard to have a bunch of you need large samples of relationships and then follow them over the course of years and keep them in your sample. Like this is hard work to do. And I feel like we're just really starting to get the answers. But so far, the best evidence suggests that the causal effect of declining relationship quality on infidelity likelihood seems to be, if anything, stronger than the causal effect of infidelity on declining relationship quality.
Well, let's now talk about how many stars we give this movie. So on a rating of 1 to 5 stars, I'll go first with this one. This is a 5-star masterpiece. I'm not taking any further questions at this time. This is it. This is the one.
I'm literally watching you drop your microphone.
This changed the genre. Did not invent the genre, but it certainly changed it.
It did.
And how often do you get the writing and the chemistry between the two of them?
Yes.
And I think it's enough of the typical romantic trajectory tropes that you understand what you're watching, but it's also breaking them in all the right places. Also, we haven't mentioned this. There are no bad guys in this movie. There's no bad guys.
That's a good point.
How awesome is that?
Yeah, that's a good point.
5-star masterpiece. This is one of my favorite movies of all time.
I also like the movie. I'm a little nervous here. I give this movie 4 stars. I think it is...
I'll let you live.
Yeah, I mean, right? If I'd gone to 3, this could have been the end of me. It is funny and it is totally delightful. I have some of the concerns I raised above. And also, you know me, I tend to like movies that are more thought-provoking, that don't sort of reveal all their secrets on a first watch. And so it's sort of a genre preference. And so the movie is wonderful and delightful and a pleasure and a joy to revisit. I don't think it's especially deep or thought-provoking.
We also award Rust Bolts on this podcast. Now, the Rust Bolt is named after Eli's advisor, the late, great Carol Rust Bolt, pioneer of close relationships research, with 5 stars, indicating a near-perfect depiction of the nature of close relationships. Eli, how many Rust Bolts do you give this movie?
Well, I live in terror of you as I speak here. I give this movie 3 Rust Bolts. And look, to be honest, I would have given it a higher score if my job were to assess how accurately it captured 1980s relationship dynamics among the urbane and highly educated. But you're asking me, I think, and the Rust Bolt measure is assessing, how generally insightful do I think it is? And I think that's a 3 out of 5 Rust Bolt movie.
Fair enough. I give it 4 Rust Bolts. I ding it a little bit for it had such a long tail with the can men and women be friends thing,
Right.
And in some ways that was not the point that I think the movie actually does make, which is that often they are, and sometimes it will grow into something, but yet there's sort of a legacy issue there. And of course, we're not really seeing the full relationship, right? They get married, the movie's over. So I'm often going to ding movies
Paul,
for
it's
that.
happily ever after.
Right.
What could we
Enough
ever
of that.
assume other than nothing ever went bad again? Presumably, the
Right.
second time they had
Yeah.
sex, there was nothing problematic at all.
I'm sure it was fine.
I'm sure it was fine.
All right, well, that is all the time we have for today. This is the Love Factually podcast. My name is Paul Eastwick. I've been here with Eli Finkel. And Eli, I will be delighted to do this with you next time.
I am looking forward to it. The Love Factually podcast is produced and edited by Paul Eastwick and Eli Finkel, featuring music from Andrew Fraker and Sons.